Welcome to the Freak Show, fellow freaks.
I am Matthew Brockmeyer.
And I'm Christa Carmen.
And this is...
Murder Coaster.
Welcome back to our second and final episode on Robin Gecht and his terrifying Chicago Ripper crew. Last week, we dove into Robin's early life, a high school dropout with a violent history, an obsession with Elvis Presley, black magic, and horror movies, his dark fetish for female breasts that led him to horribly abuse his wife and many lovers, prodding them with pins, actually injecting their breasts with Novocaine to ease the pain as he cut and burned them, eventually cutting his wife Rosemary's nipples completely off. His bizarre sexual deviancy, having sex with a family dog before beating it to death with a bat, eventually forming a devil-worshipping cult of teenage psychopaths that led to their first murder. And I don't think I got a chance to formally say to you, happy birthday.
Thank you. Happy birthday right back at you, birthday podcast co-host buddy.
Oh yeah, did you have a good one?
I did. It was very relaxing. I posted about this on social media, so if anybody follows me, you'll have already seen this. But my birthday gift to myself was a few fun books. I bought Frightful Folklore of North America, which is like sweet. An awesome like coffee table, but also like really historical and illustrated book. And then Gothic, by an illustrated history by Roger Luckhurst, and it's awesome. You got to check this out, Matt. There's like film stills, there's all history. And then on the fiction front, I got A Sunny Place for Shady People by Mariana Enriquez, and it's fabulous. I read it in like 2 days, so you should check all of those things out. How about you? What did you do?
We went to the beach and ate, and my wife gave me a Charlie Manson album. That is amazing. Sick. It's so good. It was made in 1970. I don't know how they pulled it off because he was obviously in jail, but it's one of some of the best Manson music I've ever heard.
No kidding. Maybe some of it you can share on the podcast?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I'll hit some copyright stuff.
Yeah.
I was wondering that.
Well,
like,
share
how much,
with me at least.
Absolutely.
Sorry, listeners. But...
There's some spooky shit in there.
Oh, and all it sounds like we had some good birthday fun treats. But yeah, on to the less fun and
terrifying and disgusting.
Well, let's begin. Chapter 6. The murders continue. Eddie Spritzer was now working at Winchell's Donut House, and Robin would pick him up from work in the death van, and they'd go joyriding about, listening to Elvis Presley on the stereo, laughing as they planned their next murder, still cautiously looking for women they didn't think would be missed, whose disappearances wouldn't be investigated, namely African-American sex workers.
In June of 1981, Robin was driving a yellow station wagon he'd borrowed when he picked up Eddie and they drove out into the Chicago night looking for victims. It was less than 1 month after the murder of Linda Sutton.
Robin and Eddie picked up a black woman who to this day has never been identified, and they offered her pills. This was their new technique, to drug their victims so they couldn't fight back.
They told her the pills would make her horny.
Once they'd drugged the woman, they drove out to the Schiller Woods Forest Preserve, a 284-acre nature preserve along the Des Plaines River, about 15 miles west of downtown Chicago.
They pulled the drugged woman out of the van, dragging her out deep into the forest as she moaned and pleaded, then beat her with a baseball bat.
Eddie would later tell police, quote,
I remember looking up through the twisted branches of the trees and seeing the moon, all weird and spooky, you know, while Robin was beating her head in with a baseball bat. It freaked me out, the wind and the moon, all that.
Spooked by the trees and moon, and evidently not by the fact that his friend was beating a woman's head in with a bat, Eddie went and waited in the car. 5 minutes later, Robin returned, carrying one of the woman's severed breasts.
A month later, in August 1981, they were in the red death van. Robin was giving Eddie a ride to pick up his paycheck at Winchell's Donut House when they noticed a black woman walking down the street, and Robin told Eddie to climb through the wooden door into the back of the van and wait for his signal.
Robin propositioned the woman, and she got into the van. And while Eddie hid in the back, Robin drove them up I-94 into Le Bog Woods, an 80-acre urban forest located on the upper North Branch of the Chicago River, part of the North Branch Trail System, a network of about 20 miles of paved and unpaved trails connecting Chicago to the Chicago Botanical Garden in Glencoe.
In the dark, deserted forest, Robin drove the van up over a curb, parked, then tapped twice on the floor, signaling Eddie to spring from the back of the van with a knife and a pair of handcuffs.
According to Eddie, Robin then led the woman off into the dark woods, later returning with a severed breast like a hunter with a trophy, placing it in a 5-gallon bucket he kept on the floor of the death van between the seats.
Chapter 7. Lori Ann.
On the graves, in the cracks of 1,000 leaves, somewhere in between our past and our future, rolling over all the dividing things. Are you still listening? Wanna be heard by you? Slow fall into the Indian Sea, where the cold and the hot meet, and the powers that be lead.
In May of 1982, after a winter of cooling off, the Ripper crew was again roaming the streets of Chicago looking for victims, now with Tommy Corcoralis, the youngest of them, tagging along.
As none of the other murders had been tied back to them, the crew was emboldened, perhaps even feeling they were blessed by the dark powers of the devil, whom they'd been praying to in Robin's attic, where he kept the breasts in an ornamental wooden box.
The Ripper crew would gather there in the candlelight, Elvis music playing on the stereo, an altar adorned with 6 red and black crosses.
Robin would open the ornamental wooden box, removing a breast and placing it on the altar as he read from the Bible, and they'd all masturbate into the breast, at which point Robin would take it, slice off pieces, pass them out, the Ripper crew dutifully swallowing them down like the Eucharist at Mass, blessed by the dark magic, made invincible by the power of the devil.
That's so fucking gross. Feeling secure that the police would never catch them, that Satan himself had blessed their efforts, the crew moved on from black prostitutes, now targeting any woman who caught their eye. The next one being Lorraine Borowski, who was known by all her friends as Lori Ann.
Lori Ann was a white 21-year-old secretary who worked at the Remax real estate office in the wealthy suburb of Elmhurst, about 16 miles east of Chicago.
On May 15th, 1982, at 8:30 on a lovely sunny morning, Lorraine was strolling down the tree-lined sidewalk toward the Remax office, her keys in her hand, when the Ripper crew pulled up beside her in their red deathbed, leapt out and grabbed her. Her abduction so violent her shoes were knocked off her feet. Her keys went skittering across the concrete, and her purse burst open, spewing cosmetics.
As they slammed the van door shut, Robin tore off towards the Rip Van Winkle motel as Eddie and Tommy gagged her and handcuffed her.
In Eddie's confessions, he always paints himself as just a witness, watching as Robin murdered and mutilated. But according to Tommy, Eddie was very much part of it all.
Tommy claims that it was Eddie who took out a 3-foot length of piano wire, wrapped it around Lori Ann's breast, tightening it until a sharp metal bit into her skin and severed her breast. Then both he and Robin, together, had sex with the gaping wound.
When they were finished, Robin used his homemade glass axe to kill her.
The crew then took the body out to a cemetery in Clarendon Hills and hid it in a mausoleum. Robin loved cemeteries and had often said they were the perfect place to dispose of bodies. And he was apparently right, as the body of Lori Ann would lie there in that mausoleum for over a year until Eddie himself would take detectives to it.
Because the Ripper crew's other victims had been black sex workers, Lori Ann's disappearance wasn't tied to them at all, and the investigation would suffer some serious hiccups.
Since her makeup and keys and shoes were found on the sidewalk outside her work, it seemed apparent she'd been abducted. And one store owner in the vicinity did recall seeing a red van in the area.
But then a guy who owned a nearby liquor store told investigators he'd seen her casually getting into a car on her own free will, despite her shoes being left behind. A hypnotist was brought in, as was often done back then, and under hypnosis, the liquor store owner said it was a sports car, either a Thunderbird or a Cougar. So now police were searching for a Thunderbird or Cougar and ignoring the tip about a red van.
Hypnotism has proven to be incredibly unreliable. People either unconsciously just imagine things, or they are actually suggested things during the hypnosis.
Then 7 people in the Chicago area died from taking Tylenol capsules that had been tainted with potassium cyanide, and all resources were put into that investigation.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. To this day, they don't really know exactly what happened with these poisoned Tylenol. There's all these red herrings. There's this guy, James Lewis, who tried to extort Johnson & Johnson by claiming responsibility and demanding money. And he ended up getting convicted of extortion, but it's been proven that he didn't do the actual poisonings. And the cyanide contamination may have actually happened accidentally in the manufacturing plant itself, but they still are not sure. There's a great documentary on Netflix about it all called The Tylenol Murders. Maybe we'll cover it one day. It's crazy stuff. But anyway, all of Chicago just went into a crazy panic over this Tylenol stuff, and it eclipsed all other crimes.
Chapter 8. Shui Mac.
Shui Mak was a gorgeous 30-year-old Chinese woman who'd recently immigrated to the United States with her family, who'd opened a popular restaurant in the Chicago suburbs called Ling Ling's.
On May 29, 1982, the same day the Tylenol murders began, the family was working in the restaurant, and Shui had been arguing with her brother Kent because their sister was getting married to an American man.
Kent felt strongly that their sister should marry a Chinese man, and that the marriage should be arranged by their parents, a tradition that dated back thousands of years in their family.
But Shui said this was America, and their sister was an independent, free woman. She could marry whomever she pleased. Furthermore, she was in love. It was romantic. Her marriage was going to be a beautiful, romantic, and very American thing.
But Kent said, just because they were in America, they shouldn't give up their traditions and customs.
Shui and Kent had bickered about this all day.
That night, after they'd closed the restaurant, the family were caravanning home, heading west on Irving Park Road, Kent and Shui in one car, followed by their parents in another car. It was very late, well past midnight, around 1:30 in the morning, and Kent and Shui were still arguing about the coming marriage of their sister.
The fighting eventually became so intense, the siblings screaming at each other, that Kent pulled over at a red light and told Shui to get out, that she could ride with their parents.
Shui stomped out of the car and slammed the door behind her, her brother tearing off, not realizing that their parents hadn't noticed Shui get out of the car and had passed them.
Shui Mak was now all alone on the side of the highway in the middle of the night.
She saw a Denny's restaurant in the distance and walked towards it when a police officer pulled over and asked her if she was all right, if she needed a ride. Shui told them she was fine and that she was headed to Denny's to call her family. She'd never be seen alive again.
As Shui walked along the side of the road, the Rippers pulled up in the death van, catcalling to her, propositioning her, whistling. Shui held her head high and walked on, ignoring them, which made insecure Robin irate. How dare a woman ignore him? He was the Chicago Charlie Manson. So he jammed his foot on the gas, the van leaping forward onto the shoulder, cutting her off, and Robin ordered Eddie and Andy to grab her.
Eddie and Andy leapt out of the back door of the van and grabbed the startled woman, throwing her face down in the back, punching her and locking her wrists in handcuffs as Robin tore off into the night.
Shortly afterwards, Shui's brother and parents came looking for her, roaming the empty roadway until dawn, searching, but she was gone.
Robin drove out to an empty field, the van bouncing over the dirt and weeds before skidding to a stop at a construction site, then threw open the back doors. Eddie and Andy dragging Shui out, punching and kicking her as they screamed racist slurs at her.
Robin strutted up to her as they held her down, saying,
Well, 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 let's see what we got here.
Robin ripped her shirt open, but then exclaimed angrily that she had a small chest, and Eddie, upset over it, began to smash her head into the side of the van, saying, Sorry, Robin, sorry, I'm so sorry.
It's okay, Eddie, Robin said, patting him on the back. It's okay. We can do this anyway. Go get the knives. Robin wrapped a length of wire around Shui's throat, then had Eddie hold it while he took a knife and cut her breasts off, then sliced open her belly so that her viscera spilled out, stabbing her in the chest until she was lifeless. Then he and Eddie took turns having sex with the wounds while Andy watched.
When they were done, Robin dragged her off in the bushes and left her there like so much trash.
She'd be discovered 4 months later, only 1.5 miles from where Shui's brother had thrown her out of the car.
Chapter 9. Angel York. Angel York was only 19 years old, a sex worker, strolling North Avenue at 3 a.m. in June of 1982, hoping to find customers as they left the taverns, which would close at 4, and then work another rush at dawn as construction crews headed to work.
But police were out in droves that night, patrolling the strip, doing a sweep, and as they passed, she ducked into an alley to hide when a red van pulled up.
She'd seen the red van circling the block, knew whoever was inside was looking for a date, so she ran up, opened the door, and jumped inside, where she was greeted with the barrel of a .45 caliber pistol.
The man she later described to police as skinny, greasy-haired, and white drove her out to North Cleaver Street, a neighborhood of deserted factories, parked, and ordered her through the plywood door into the back of the van.
He made her strip, tied her feet together, and handcuffed her right hand to her left foot before pasting duct tape over her mouth. He retrieved a pair of pantyhose and wrapped them tightly around her breasts.
He then leaned back and stared at her, nodding, before taking his own clothes off. He then traced a line along her breast, thrust a knife at her, and exclaimed, "Cut it."
Angel was horrified. He wanted her to mutilate herself, and she stammered, I can't do that."
The greasy-haired man jammed the gun into the side of her head and growled, "I said, cut it."
With trembling hands, Angel cut a small nick in her breast, hoping the sight of blood would satisfy the man, but instead he howled,
"More!"
Reeling, she pushed the knife into herself, and the man then leapt at her, digging his fingers into her and clawing open the wound, the pain so excruciating she nearly passed out.
The man kept this up for over an hour, forcing her to cut herself open, tormenting her, finally slapping pieces of duct tape over her wounds and warning her he knew where she was, not to go to the police, then threw her out of the van, head first.
Angel staggered out into the empty streets, passing empty factories until she came across a security guard who drove her to a hospital.
And what's important to note here is that Robin Gecht committed this crime alone, which leads many to speculate he committed many other crimes alone as well, perhaps even murder.
Chapter 10. Sandra Delaware.
Sandra Delaware was a very pretty sex worker, just 19 as well, who looked very much like young Lisa Bonet in Angel Heart, who was working North Avenue by the Chicago River at 2 a.m. when the death van pulled up to her, Robin driving, Eddie and Andy hiding in the back.
Robin offered her some pills, telling her they'd make her horny, and the two agreed on a price for sex. And they drove off, parking by the Chicago Avenue Bridge, Robin then tapping twice on the floor, signaling to Eddie to exit the rear of the van and creep around to the side, taking a knife with him.
Robin then leapt out, dragging Sandra from the van, handcuffing her, and dragging her under the bridge where they'd be hidden from passing cars.
Eddie and Robin ripped her clothes off, and Robin forced her to straddle him while she performed fellatio on Eddie, who stood beside them. Robin then asked Eddie. You having fun yet?
Eddie said no, and Robin asked, well, what you gonna do about it?
Eddie whipped out a pocket knife and began stabbing Sandra in the chest. As she lay there bleeding, Andy, in a final horrible indignity, pushed a wine bottle up her anus, forcing the dying teenager to sit on it as he pushed her down, leaving a massive puddle of blood beneath her.
Chapter 11, Rose.
Time slipping through my fingers. Can't recall all the days as the ocean falls and rises. So does life have to change. Don't buy plastic flowers when I die. Somewhere, spend it well, live your life.
Rose Marie Beck Davis, who went by Rose, was a married 30-year-old marketing executive. She was an artist, a graduate of the Southern Illinois School of Graphic Design. She designed shopping center windows and had even designed her own wedding dress.
She had a bit of a punky look, short cropped hair, and an ohm tattooed on her wrist. Her left ear pierced 3 times. She was known to her friends to be a free spirit.
On September 7th, 1982, Rose called her husband Daryl and told him she'd be out late. She was going out with a client for dinner and drinks. Daryl told her good luck. That would be the last time he ever spoke to his wife.
Rose drove her VW Rabbit to the Radisson Hotel and met with the sales manager, Angie Colucci, who loved all of her ideas, and a deal was struck. To celebrate, they went to a nightclub, then headed to the Avenue 1 restaurant in the Drake Hotel for a late-night, lavish meal. It was after 2 a.m. when Rose finally called it a night and walked back to her car. As she was fishing her keys from her purse, a red van pulled up, the driver asking her, "Hey, want to have some fun?"
Rose answered sternly, "No." And suddenly, 2 men leapt out and violently grabbed her by the arms, shoving her in the van as she kicked and struggled.
The Ripper crew took her to an alley off Lakeshore Drive, where they mutilated and murdered her right in view of the street, on one of the wealthiest streets in downtown Chicago.
When Rose's body was found, she was so disfigured that police originally thought she'd leapt out of a window, and it was a case of suicide.
Her face was unrecognizable. Her nose and eye sockets were crushed. Her jaw was broken. Her teeth smashed out. A black sock was tied around her throat, and her breasts were slashed with such force that blood spatters were found in a 9-foot radius around her body, and a piece of broken lumber had been shoved up into her vagina to the small intestine.
She was identified by the Ohm tattoo on her wrist.
Coincidentally, Special Agent Robert Ressler from the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit was in Chicago teaching detectives the art of profiling at that time, and he was asked to make a profile of Rose's killer. We've talked about Robert Ressler before many, many times, He more or less came up with the term serial killer, though it had been used before, but he made it really famous. And the Netflix show Mindhunters was based on him and his partner, John Douglas.
Ressler guessed that the killer was short and skinny, that he had, that he had effeminate features and was most likely bisexual, all of which were true. But unfortunately, detectives seized on the idea of him being a gay man, which led police to a hairdresser named Jacques Monaco.
Jacques Monaco lived in one of the buildings that was separated by the alley in which Rose Davis was killed. Police then announced that they'd caught the killer, which made the Ripper crew feel even more invincible and protected by the dark powers of the devil.
Chapter 12. Rafael Tirado. On October 6, 1982, Eddie was driving the Red Ripper van while Robin rode shotgun.
They headed down North Avenue toward Damien Avenue, into a Puerto Rican neighborhood known for drug dealing. As they got to the corner of Damien and North Avenue, they saw three guys sitting at a telephone booth, and Robin instructed Eddie to slow down while he climbed into the back and retrieved a .38 pistol and a rifle from a cabinet and loaded them.
As the van coasted up to the men, Robin rolled down the window and told Eddie to stop the van. As it crested to a stop, Robin pointed the .38 pistol out the window and began firing at the men, completely unprovoked, for no reason at all.
Robin fired 5 shots. Rafael Tirado was hit in the back, throat, and face. He fell to the ground and died there on the sidewalk.
Albert Rosario was shot in the head just above the left eye. After extensive brain surgery, he would live, but would be paralyzed and spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair.
Robin Gecht was now in full berserker mode, and that same day, immediately after this random shooting, he would claim his last mutilation victim.
Chapter 13. The Final Victim. After the shooting, Robin got behind the wheel and had Eddie hide in the back of the van, and they drove down North Avenue to where it intersected with Troop Street. And there they saw sex worker Denise Gardner.
Robin asked her how much for a blowjob. She said $20. He told her he'd give her $25, something she'd later say should have been a red flag that he was a, quote, sadistic hooker freak.
Robin drove her to Willow and Burling, a quiet neighborhood of small factories, and pulled a gun on her, demanding she eat a handful of pills.
Robin handcuffed her, assaulted her, then carved her up with a knife after she'd passed out from the pills, cutting her left breast completely off and saving it, hacking her right breast to the point where it just hung there by a few shreds of flesh, then dumped her off and into an alleyway where she'd be discovered by a homeless man looking for recyclables in the morning.
Robin had left Denise for dead, but she was very much alive and would prove to be his downfall, not only giving police an accurate description of him and his van in the hospital, but after detectives tracked his van down, bravely picking him out of a lineup in her wheelchair with IV tubes in her arms, screaming, "That's the bastard!" when she saw him.
Robin was charged with aggravated battery, deviant sexual assault, armed robbery, and kidnapping, but was actually let out on bond after a middle-aged woman that he was having a sexual relationship with took out a mortgage on her home to bail him out.
And almost immediately, he went out in his death van, searching for another victim.
He picked up a woman named Cynthia Smith, but when she got in the van, she realized he was the one who was slashing the breasts of sex workers. Word had gotten out.
Terrified and in a panic, she went to open the door, but Robin had removed the passenger side door handle. Robin grabbed his homemade glass hatchet and swung it at her face, but she managed to duck, and as the blade swept past her, she clawed her way over him into the driver's side door, throwing it open and tumbling out. Robin then drove off into the night.
Chapter 14. The Interrogations.
Police had questioned Eddie, as he'd been the one driving the van when they originally tracked it down. He denied knowing anything, saying Robin was just his boss, and they let him go. But they thought Eddie knew more than he was telling them, especially after they talked to a woman who knew him. And when she had called Eddie a sissy, he'd told her, quote,
"I ain't no sissy. I killed a couple broads and cut off their tits. It was very messy."
This time, they put the pressure on him, and Eddie eventually fell to pieces and began confessing.
Eddie ended up making a 78-page written statement detailing his relationships with Robin Gecht and the murders that they committed together as the Ripper Crew, telling investigators about murders that they didn't even know about, like Lorraine Borowski, who at this point was still just a missing person. And then Eddie himself led police to the mausoleum, where her body had lain undiscovered for over a year.
But by the time Eddie finished with his first statement, he'd given up 7 murders and 1 aggravated assault, which investigators felt they could use against Robin Gecht.
Eddie claimed years later that police had tortured him to get the confession. According to his story, which honestly is most likely total bullshit, made up to make himself look like less of a snitch, it took them 5 days to break him.
Eddie claimed detectives took him out to the woods and forced him to dig a grave, pushed him into it, and then detectives unloaded their handguns by his head.
Eddie says he was then taken to an abandoned house where they beat him for hours. Then, after he passed out, they pissed on him.
Regardless of whether any of this is true or not, when detectives brought Robin in for questioning, they walked him right past Eddie, who looked up at him and said, "I told them about all the murders, Robin. I'm sorry."
and Robin fixed Eddie with his gaze, those eyes that were supposedly able to hypnotize, smiled, and said, "Eddie, I have no idea what you're even talking about."
At which point, Eddie told detectives he wanted to change his story, that it wasn't Robin he'd committed the murders with at all. It was Andy Kokoralis. Robin didn't have anything to do with it. Not at all.
When Robin was questioned, he was friendly and remained adamant that he was innocent, that he was actually the real victim here, being accused of crimes he had nothing to do with. When investigators described the horrible mutilations and murders, Robin would well up and begin to cry. He'd give them puppy dog eyes and say he'd never hurt anyone in his whole life.
At one point, detectives would later state that Robin, who was bisexual and slightly effeminate, appeared to be flirting with them, which they found incredibly odd.
Soon Andy Kokoralis was brought in for questioning, and he quickly confessed to it all, going into detail about how the crew had kidnapped women and stabbed them with everything from knives and razors to tin cans and can openers. Before it was all over, Andy confessed to 18 murders, including Rose Davis, who they hadn't even suspected of being a victim of the Ripper crew. So, Andy would more than double the original victim count.
When detectives investigated Robin's whereabouts during the murders that Eddie and Andy confessed to, they found that the crew partied at the Rip Van Winkle Motel. The manager called them all cultists and said they often performed rituals in their room. And he also said there was a fourth guy who'd be with them, Andy's brother, Tommy.
So investigators went to the Kokoralis house and interviewed Tommy, who, as we said, was borderline mentally disabled with an IQ of just 76. The cops showed him a picture of Lorraine Borowski, and Tommy said that he and his brother Andy had taken her for a quote-unquote one-way ride out to the Rip.
Mr. Kokoralis was already horribly upset that his son Andy had confessed to murder. Now his second son was confessing to it as well, but it was about to get much worse for the strict Greek Orthodox Christian, because not only would Tommy confess to multiple murders, he'd tell the police all about the devil worshipping and of an ornamental chest Robin kept in his attic and satanic chapel with 15 severed breasts inside it.
Police raided Robin's home, arresting him again, this time for murder. And when they went into the attic, they found the satanic chapel, just as Tommy had described to them. Black and red crosses, candles, a satanic Bible, even the ornamental chest. But the breasts were missing, Robin evidently having ditched them after being released on bond after his first arrest.
By now the story had hit the press and it was being reported in the news. And Phil Whatley, a police reporter for the Chicago Tribune, felt that since they targeted sex workers in the middle of the night, slashing them open and keeping gruesome body parts, it was like a gang of modern-day Jack the Rippers. So he called them the Ripper Murders, which stuck, and the legend of the horrible Ripper crew was born.
Chapter 15, The Trials.
The four members of the Ripper crew would not stand trial together, but each had their own separate trial.
Robin was the first to be tried, and he attempted to avoid trial by pleading insanity. He was evaluated for competency and was not only declared to be competent to stand trial, but was also considered to have been sane at the time of the offenses. His trial began on September 20th, 1983.
At the trial, the prosecutor put forward some compelling evidence. In his home was the Satanic Chapel, as well as a rifle used in the shooting of Rafael Tirado, and the trophy box in which Andrew had described seeing as many as 15 pieces of female breasts.
Taking the stand to speak in his own defense, Robin admitted that he had attacked Beverly Washington, but insists that he had killed no one and was completely innocent of the rape and aggravated battery charges. He claimed that during the time when most of the murders had occurred, he didn't even know the other defendants, which was utter bullshit.
But with no physical evidence linking him to the murders, and his accomplices refusing to testify against him, the murder charges couldn't stick.
So, while not convicted of murder, he was found guilty of attempted murder, rape, deviant sexual assault, aggravated battery, and armed violence. And the judge sentenced him to 120 years in prison, stating, "Only a devil would do these things. An animal would not do these things. A monster would."
Next, it was Tommy Korkorales' turn to go to trial.
His lawyers attempted to block his confession from being admitted into the trial, but were unsuccessful.
At his trial, the jury heard what Tommy did to his victims, the torture, mutilation, and murder. In 1984, he was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment for his part in the brutal murder of Lorraine Borowski. He was spared the death penalty because of his detailed confession. On appeal, his sentence was later commuted to 70 years in prison.
His brother Andrew would be tried in 2 separate counties. At the first trial, he was tried for the murder of Rose Beck Davis. In his confession, he had admitted that he had taken part in the abduction of Rose with the other 3 men, during which she was forced into the van and he had beaten her with a hatchet until she was dead. It took just 3 hours deliberation for the jury to come to a decision, finding him guilty of rape and murder. They sentenced him to life in prison.
At his second trial, Andy decided to recant everything he had confessed to, and to steadfastly deny that he had killed or raped anyone. He accused the police of coercion in each of his confessions, said that they had made false promises, and insisted that they had even beaten him into admitting what they wanted him to say.
But when Detective Warren Wilcox was called to the stand to describe his interrogation, he said that when he had shown Andy a line of photos, Andy, without being prompted, had picked out Lorraine Borowski and said, "That's the girl Eddie Spritzer and I killed in the cemetery."
The jury deliberated only 3 hours before returning their verdict. They found Andrew Korkorales guilty of the murder of Lorraine Borowski, and he was sentenced to death.
On April 2nd, 1984, Eddie Spritzer, seeing the writing on the wall, seeing how his friend Andy had received the death penalty, copped a plea and pleaded guilty to the murders of Rose Davis, Sandra Delaware, Shui Mack, and Rafael Tirado. For each murder, he received a life sentence, as well as time for a multitude of other charges, including rape and deviant sexual assault.
But Eddie was still facing a separate trial for the Linda Sutton murder.
At that trial, Eddie admitted that he and his friends had abducted Linda Sutton as she was walking near Wrigley Field, and together they'd taken her to the wooded field by the Rip Van Winkle Hotel, where she was handcuffed, raped, and her breasts removed, and she was left to die.
But his lawyer appealed to the jury to spare his life, saying he was just a dumb kid following orders. His relatives testified how he was a shy young man with a history of being bullied. But the prosecution had folks testify about how he had bragged about his crimes, referring to the women as broads, and was laughing over the fact that he had mutilated and killed several of them.
Eddie was described by the prosecution as, quote, every woman's nightmare, saying that he was one of a, quote, pack of weasels.
On March 4th, Eddie Spritzer was convicted of aggravated kidnapping and murder. 2 weeks later, the jury deliberated for an hour before sentencing him to death, and he was put on death row in Pontiac State Correctional Facility in Joliet, Illinois.
Andrew Kolokouris' execution was scheduled for March 17, 1999. And guess who his cellmate on death row was? None other than John Wayne Gacy. Which is a crazy twist because, according to Robin at least, it was Andrew who started the rumor that Robin had worked for Gacy, which Robin says is a bullshit lie.
And for a moment, it was looking like Andrew was going to beat his death sentence, as there were many, including an Illinois Supreme Court justice, calling for a moratorium on all executions. And the governor had already exonerated 12 death row inmates after a series of articles in the Chicago Tribune about injustices in the legal system. In some of these cases, there was clear proof that the state of Illinois had prosecuted and imprisoned completely innocent men who were about to be put to death, and the governor considered including Andy in a moratorium. But the murders were so notorious and so incredibly brutal, not to mention that Andy was obviously very guilty, that the governor came to the decision that if anyone deserved the death penalty, it was Andy.
So just hours before Andy was to be executed, Governor Ryan issued a 3-page statement stating that since a jury had decided his fate according to the law of the land, and his attempts to appeal had been rejected over a span of 16 years, he believed that justice had been served, and as a result, there would be no further barriers between Andrew Kolokouris and his death.
Andy was flown to a super maximum security prison in Tams, Illinois, where he spent the day praying and fasting.
Despite the preparations for his death, Andy still believed that there would be a last-minute pardon, right up to the very last moment. Strapped onto a gurney, he offered the Borowski family an apology, saying, quote, "To the Borowski family, I'm truly sorry for your loss. I mean this sincerely."
Andy said that the kingdom of heaven was at hand, and then received a lethal injection at 12:34 p.m.
By the following year, in January of 2000, Governor Ryan announced a moratorium on all executions in the state. As a result, Andy Kolokouris gained the distinction of being the very last person executed before the Illinois moratorium on the death penalty. And conversely, his buddy, Eddie Spritzer, ended up spared the death penalty and lived. Just very weird twists and turns there.
Chapter 16. Afterwards.
There's something about your eyes, something telling me a story, telling me that all the love we had is fading.
In another strange twist of fate, on March 7th, 1999, Robin Gecht's son David and 3 others were charged with first-degree murder in connection with a shooting death, which police claimed was gang-related. David was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 45 years in prison.
But guess what? Ends up Robin Gecht's son was innocent.
Yep, crazy, crazy, crazy. It turns out Robin Gecht's son David was one of dozens of people who were wrongly convicted based on misconduct by Chicago detective Ronaldo Guevara. The misconduct included coercing false confessions through violence and coercing false identifications from witnesses.
So on May 5th, 2022, David was granted a new trial, and on July 18th, 2022, he was officially exonerated.
In March 2023, David filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the city of Chicago and Cook County and Guevara seeking compensation for his wrongful conviction. In October 2024, Cook County settled the lawsuit for $3.1 million.
So Robin Gecht's son is now a fairly wealthy man.
And today, Robin Gecht, head of the Chicago Ripper crew, is serving his sentence at Danville Correctional Center. His parole date is October 10th, 2042. He will be 88 years old.
And we actually have a very good friend of the show who was in contact with Robin Gecht. They're pen pals. And they say that Robin is very polite and well-read, loves to talk about books, and reads historical fiction, true crime, and erotica. Ooh la la. He draws, paints, remembers their birthday, and sends them cards every year. Never says anything at all inappropriate, and is very considerate, always asking how they're doing, very much unlike other killers they've talked to, who are completely self-centered, like BTK Dennis Rader, whom they say would never dream to ask how you are doing. They say Robin actually gives the appearance of being a genuinely caring human being and strongly professes his innocence and says he never met John Wayne Gacy and that rumor is utter nonsense. But we all know how skilled psychopaths are at pretending they're human and putting on the mask of sanity. But who knows? Who knows? Only Robin Gecht knows what goes on in that head of his. But I can only imagine it to be a very, very dark place.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of Robin Gecht and the infamous Chicago Ripper crew. Thank you so much for listening.
And do you have a story you'd like us to cover? Let us know at murdercoasterpodcast@gmail.com. That's murdercoasterpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you all so much for listening. We will see you next week.
See you then.